Dr. Night Echoes. I live on the outskirts of a city where it's mostly street parking in the neighborhoods. I park in the garage in the back alley, so I hardly ever go out the front. One day my girlfriend came over and parked in the street directly out front of my house. She comes in and mentions to me that there is a gold Jeep that has been parked in front of my house for at least a week in the same spot. It smells like bad BO when I walk past it, she told me. Immediately, there are bells going off in my head. I tell her what I think it is and that I'm going to go check it out. She jokingly replied something like, "Maybe you'll find a dead person." Well, I had the worst feeling walking down the stairs and out to that car. I got outside and noticed something dripping out of the back seat into the gutter. I catch the smell. Oh, fuck, I thought. This Jeep had tinted windows, so I go up to it and look through the front passenger window with my hands cupped, thinking someone maybe OD'd or took their own life in there. I didn't see anything up front. I walked around to the rear and looked to see if it was an animal or something in the trunk. Still nothing. Then I walked around to the driver's side and looked in the back. I saw the guy, lying hunched over to the side in the back seat, but not naturally. The guy had a bag zip-tied over his head and his hands zip-tied behind his back. I register what I'm seeing and jump back in shock and call the cops. I waited outside, and the fire department showed up first. As I watched them break in, some of the younger ones start heaving. Well, it turns out his bodily fluids were pooled up in the back seat, and that's what I saw dripping out. Cops closed off the block for the whole evening, and I got drunk. I don't recommend that to anyone. They never did solve the homicide. I still have anxious feelings sometimes that I'm going to happen upon a body. Also, I won't ever forget that smell. I watched someone become a body right in front of me. There was a motorcycle in front of me at a red light. He made a right on red and immediately got plowed by a Tacoma driving through his green light on a 45 miles per hour road. I jumped out of my car immediately and went for the downed rider, but fuck. He had an open-face helmet, and he went face down for 30 to 40 feet. It was very, very bad, and he was immediately dead. No pulse, no breathing, and I couldn't bring myself to even try CPR because his face was gone. Let's go with gone. I was also in the Army, and suicide bombers were less disturbing for me than this tragedy. I used to work at this sports bar, so it wasn't uncommon for people to leave their car in the parking lot for a day or two. After having a couple days off, I come into work and this car that was there a day before my weekend started is still parked in the same spot. I tell my boss about it and go check it out. As I get close to the car, the smell hits me like a truck. Some guy committed suicide in his car during a heat wave in the middle of summer. I call the cops and tell my boss. When the police arrived, I was asked to make a statement. While I was doing this, the paramedics showed up to remove the body. They got this bloated, rotten corpse halfway out of the vehicle when it just fell apart, splattering on the pavement. I'll never forget that fucking smell. Not me, but my dad did. He was fishing and found a guy floating in the Kentucky River. He at first thought it was a dead cow until he paddled closer. The man was badly decomposed and bloated. Our local small-town sheriff's department used my dad's boat to transport the body. My dad had trouble sleeping for a while afterward and sold the boat a few weeks later. My grandpa found a body decades earlier in the same area, and my uncle did too. It's believed the guy my dad found accidentally fell in while high on meth. I used to work in self-storage, and when I left, a buddy of mine took over the property I used to manage. We took a weekend off from our respective jobs to go to Vegas a few years ago. He lived on site in a company apartment. When we got back late in the evening, he walked around his property, as is pretty typical. There was a car parked with someone in it. He knocked on the window and got no response. He called me and told me about it, and since I was close by, I told him I'd be right there. As I got close to the car, I could smell death. The car was locked and all the windows were fogged up inside. It was obvious that the person inside was dead. He called the police and they responded with fire and medical. Yeah, the guy was dead. Reviewing the security cameras showed him come in and park there about 36 hours earlier. It was an overdose. I don't think it was ever determined whether it was accidental or suicide. I didn't exactly find a body, but I had a neighbor in my apartment building jump. I didn't know what happened at first, as I just saw a man lying on the sidewalk, and I couldn't see much from my first floor apartment. I worked in human services with homeless folks and saw that he wasn't wearing shoes, so my first thought was that he was intoxicated and either fell or passed out. I ran outside, worried that he was overdosing. As soon as I ran out the front door, I saw that on the other side of his head was a massive pool of blood, and I realized what happened. He was gasping for air with wide, open eyes when I got to him. His pulse was weak. My girlfriend was already calling 911, so I tried to gauge responsiveness and keep him conscious. But the entire time, he felt cold. I remember thinking that his skin felt like rubber. Someone else came outside and did CPR when we couldn't find a pulse anymore. He was dead by the time EMTs arrived. All of that really haunted me. But what bothered me most was that for weeks after, I would often hear women in the apartment gossiping about it and talking about how they watched it all happen from their balconies. The thought that so many people watched him jump and didn't even try to help bothers me more than anything else. We found a body washed up in the rocks on the beach. I was taking photos of vultures because they were sitting on the rocks and they were pretty large. I first saw his distended stomach and followed it down to his foot. I grabbed my husband and said, "That's a body. Is that a body? Oh my gosh, that's a body." After double checking, we walked away to call 911. Checking a third time, from a different angle, I saw some of his skull missing and the unmistakable human hand. Somehow, we were able to get cell service long enough to tell the 911 dispatcher which state park we were in. Ambulance, firefighters, state police, a Coast Guard helicopter, truck, and boat all showed up. It was amazing to watch. They carried him up in a body bag, placed him on the asphalt, and left him there for 30 minutes. It was just another day for first responders. Oddly, we are thankful to have found him because he was on a part of the beach no one ever crosses the river to get to. The tide was coming in when he was pulled out. Had we not found him when we did, the crabs and vultures would have finished him off. His family would have never had answers. I don't know his name or anything other than what we witnessed. We are fine. Our trauma of finding a body is nothing compared to what his family would have endured, never knowing what happened to him. Found 3, and I still have horrific nightmares about it. Driving through the night on my way home from out of state, I see lights that don't look right and aren't moving in the fog. I slow down and realize that 2 cars had collided, and one had flipped over and through the guardrail. I pull over and run out to see if I could help. I find a guy and his wife trapped in their car with various injuries, but both conscious, and the woman on the phone with 911. I could hear sirens by then, and also a baby screaming. So I told them to hang tight and climbed over the guardrail and started to run down the embankment to check the other car, freaking out about a baby being hurt, only to immediately trip over the driver who'd been thrown clear through the windshield from the impact and then rolled over by the car. I almost threw up at the sight of him and still can't get him out of my head. Next came the passenger in the front seat, who was half hanging out of the window, obviously also crushed in the rollover. There were 2 kids in the back seat with her, both in their car seats still. The toddler was crying and screaming and bleeding, but the baby next to him was silent. I didn't realize at first and convinced myself she was just sleeping, but then I moved closer to try to open the door, and I suddenly just knew. I tried not to look after that. I just waited and tried to calm down the little boy while I waited for the firefighters to come down. It's still one of the most horrific things I've ever seen, and I think about that little boy often. His entire family gone in one night. He was barely old enough to tell me his name, just kept sobbing and screaming for his mommy while I tried to keep his focus on me and not her body in direct view of where he was stuck in his car seat. I was a volunteer with the fire brigade in my former life. We responded to a car accident on a notorious bend a little out of town. People tend to take this particular S-bend way too fast. It's a 100 zone, but cars can't take such tight, swerving bends at that speed and not end up a broken mess. So we arrived as the first responders on the scene. Being volunteers, we generally get to events prior to police and ambos. There's a car that had almost made it around the first bend, but lost control. Careered across the opposite side of the road, rolled, went through a fence, and ended up wrapped around a tree near the second bend, 200 meters away. The driver had nearly been decapitated, and the front passenger had become part of the car. There was a children's car seat about halfway between both bends that had been ejected from the car, likely as it rolled. 4 of us were sent to see if there was anyone injured around. I found the toddler in the paddock, dead. I quit not long after that. Don't speed. Buckle your kids up properly. Got back to my GF's house after doing some grocery shopping for her mom, and when we went inside, something was off. We found her older brother with slit wrists in the tub just about the time their mom pulled into the driveway. It was unpleasant. I'm not sure if this counts, but I was walking to elementary school one day around 8 a.m. I was between 9 to 11 years old. I passed a 3-story building, and there was a body hanging off the side. Turns out the dude shot his wife, then hung himself from his balcony. No one got there soon enough to deal with it before all the kids walked by and saw. Even by after school, he was still there, but they covered him with a blanket. I'll see if I can find the news report. A few years back, my dad and I were getting back on the highway after leaving the dump. Approaching the highway, we see a car on the other side flip over several times before landing upside down in the ravine between the 2 ramps. My dad and I pull over and immediately jump down to help. This area is surrounded by corporate businesses, so everyone else that stopped remained spectators because they didn't want to get their suits dirty. My dad jumps onto the car, which is upside down. I'm waiting in the water, and we don't find anyone inside. Someone says they think they saw a body fly out of the car when it flipped. We start digging through the surrounding thick brush until we come across her body. Without a doubt, she died almost immediately. It wasn't particularly gory. She had some contusions. Her limbs were in positions they shouldn't be, but otherwise her body was intact. As I'm recalling and writing this, I think the thing that stands out the most about finding her was that her still and lifeless face showed how shocking her last seconds were. As far as how it affected me, it was a little traumatic for a few days. I left for an international vacation the next day, so that distraction probably helped. The sound of her car struggling to idle was really creepy, and the smell the car was emitting sometimes pops into my nose, and it will be one I never forget. Also, driving on that ramp where she died, I always drive a little more carefully now.
When I was 8, I was walking with my dad and our dogs deep in the woods, and the dogs started barking at something in the distance. Bears and cougars were a possibility, so I was looking as hard as I could, and I saw a mannequin maybe 50 yards away. My dad said, "There's no way." One of the dogs kept barking at it from about half the distance between us and wouldn't come back. My dad went off the trail to retrieve the dog and shouted toward what I now could make out was a person. "Hey there, sorry about my dog, I don't know what." He stopped, rushed back with the dog, and said, "We have to go home right now." At the time, my 8-year-old logic assumed that it must be a person he doesn't like from work or from the neighborhood or something, and he just didn't want to chat. We walked home fast and in silence, and he went back out right away. A few hours later, he came home with 2 police officers asking me about what I saw. I remember explaining that I thought it was a mannequin, but I realized it was a really quiet person. What I didn't know how to explain was that there was an absolute stillness about him. The officers didn't tell me then, and my dad didn't tell me until I was 16. But what I saw was a man who had hung himself.